So hello, everyone. It is 6 p.m. and I'd like to call the March 30th of 2021 meeting of the Town Council to order. If we could please take a moment of silence to acknowledge our military personnel, firefighters, police officers, civilians, and servants who have dedicated their lives protecting our safety, freedom, and our democracy. Thank you all. In accordance with Mass General Law, tonight's meeting is being audio and video recorded. If anyone in our audience is recording, could you please identify yourself?
I don't see anybody.
Thank you, Don.
Yep.
Tonight's meeting is being held virtually via a Zoom webinar pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. Jeannie, anyone signed up for public comments?
No, there is not.
Thank you. Council comments? And Mary, do you have a report for us this evening?
Yes, I do. It's brief. So I just wanted you to know that for the last, and everyone who's watching, that essentially the work of my office in the last couple of weeks has been developing the package that you have received in anticipation of tonight's draft budget, as well as the comprehensive capital improvement plan, and meeting with the capital committee that put that together. And so there was a lot of effort that had to be coordinated to get that done. But so it was a fair amount of time. I'm getting an echo.
Yeah, that was me. I apologize.
Okay, no problem.
Should be all set.
I wanted to make sure it wasn't me.
Oh,
And the other thing I was going to say is that the vaccine clinics will be terminated as of I think it's April 7th is the last one. And these are just the remainder second dose clinics for our housing authority and congregate living populations in town. I really have to commend Amy Petrosky, Paul Morissette, and Mary Beth Dowd for their really great cooperation with each other, as well as with all the residents and my office coordinating these clinics. They were just really great. And I know the people who were able to be vaccinated at those clinics really appreciated the comfort that they received by the local administration of that. So they really worked very well together serving the community. The other item in the report is that of course, the master plan continues its work through the PVPC. Just today, in fact, I had the privilege of taking a stroll through the northwest quadrant of town with Don Mackey and representatives of the Pioneer Valley Planning Committee, as well as Bethany and John Torsha and George Kingston. Bethany has received another grant called Technical Assistance from Pioneer Valley to administer the local rapid recovery for businesses once they try to emerge from COVID. So she's designated that northwest quadrant where there are 37 commercial entities in East Long Meadow. And so we strolled up one side of North Main and down the other, and stopped at a few places and got a bird's eye view of what was going on there, and we're able to develop some kind of interesting theories about the future of that. It's very walkable. There's a lot of restaurants, and there will soon be more if everything goes according to plan. So there's a lot of optimism as a result of that walk. And so that was about an hour or so this morning. And last but not least, the town report for 2020 is on its way to the printer after a couple of other minor edits. And as I say at the close of my report, the balance of what I personally have been doing this month will have to be discussed in executive session at the tail end of this meeting. So thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Steve, I just want you to know, I'm not trying to encroach on your space, but the sun is so strong here, and I don't want to complain about it because it's nice to see it, but I will start shifting more to the right once I can get it out of my view. So, our approval of minutes will be continued in April. That being said, number 7 under communications, correspondence, and announcements, our annual town election update. I believe Jeannie has something for us.
Yep, and forgive me for reading, I just don't want to miss any steps here. In my last report to you regarding the annual town election, I stated there were 3 candidates who had taken out nomination papers and returned them for town council, and 2 had done the same for school committee. Those 3 candidates for town council are present Councillor Tom O'Connor, Connor O'Shea, and Cassandra Sarasolo. The 2 school committee candidates are present school committee member Sarah Trullo and Amy DeLenta. So those names will appear on the ballot on June 8th. And per the charter, a drawing will be used to determine the order of names as they will appear on the ballot. And this drawing will be on April 8 at 2 p.m. via Zoom open public meeting. There will also be a ballot question to vote on the charter revisions that you approved in your last meeting. And the state is allowing absentee voting for local elections that take place before June 30th of this year, as well as early mail-in voting. And the state's also allowing early in-person voting only if recommended and requested by the election town official, who is me. But I expect I will not request this. Given the opportunities for absentee and mail-in early voting, I don't see justifying the expense of early in-person voting and the logistics of finding an appropriate site for that either. So if anybody has any questions or concerns about that, they can let me know. And that's about it.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
Under 7B, this came in early this morning, and thanks, Jeannie, for moving quickly and being able to put it on the agenda and address it this evening. The proclamation of April 11th through 17th, 2021, as a National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. And Mary, can you give us a little bit more info on that?
Mary, you're muted.
Muted.
There you go. I don't have a whole lot of information about it, Mr. President. I got the email this morning from the Deputy Director at Westcom, which is the document that was forwarded to you by the clerk, essentially asking that the town of East Long Meadow participate in the declaration of this proclamation of National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week. So I forwarded on. It calls for my signature, but the last paragraph says that it's resolved that the Town Council of East Long Meadow declare the week to be National Safety Week. So I didn't feel as though I should sign it without putting it before you, but it's simply a proclamation to honor the police, firefighters, first responders, who obviously respond to all of our emergency situations.
That's great. I'll entertain a motion to do.
So Mike, I move to authorize the town manager, Mary McNally, to sign a proclamation that the town of East Long Meadow declares the week of April 11th to the 17th, 2021 to be National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week.
Thank you, Ralph.
I second that.
And thanks for the second, Pat. Any discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Sorry, Pat.
Just a quick question. It says telecommunicators, so I'm imagining this is mostly to do with the dispatch, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Pat, that Christy Lord, who I referenced, is the Deputy Director of Westcom, of which we're, obviously now a member.
Okay. Pat, we'll start with you.
Yes.
Tom?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Marilyn?
Yes.
And Don?
Yes.
Kathy?
I thought I was being left out. Yes.
It's a revolving package on the screen, but we're getting it done. Thank you. There are no public hearings this evening, and under orders of the day, there are no licensing matters. Under financial matters, B1, amendment of the 2013-29 loan order motion for the replacement of Meadowbrook Elementary School roof.
I make a motion vote that the loan order adopted by this council on April 23rd, 2019, which appropriated $3,188,859 for the purpose of paying cost of replacing the roof at Meadowbrook Elementary School, is hereby amended to read as follows. That the town of East Long Meadow appropriate the amount of $1,706,115 for the purpose of paying cost of replacing the roof at Meadowbrook Elementary School at 607 Parker Street, East Long Meadow, Mass., including the payment of all costs incidental or related thereto, which proposed repair project would materially extend the useful life of the school and preserve an asset that otherwise is capable of supporting the required educational program, and for which the town of East Long Meadow may be eligible for a grant from the Massachusetts School Building Authority, MSBA, said amount to be expended under the direction of East Long Meadow School Committee. To meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the town manager, is authorized to borrow $913,534 under Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, or pursuant to any other enabling authority. The town of East Long Meadow acknowledges that the MSBA grant program is a non-entitlement discretionary program based on need as determined by the MSBA. And any project cost the town of East Long Meadow incurs in excess of any grant approved by and received from the MSBA shall be the sole responsibility of the town of East Long Meadow, provided further that any grant that the town of East Long Meadow may receive from the MSBA for the project, excuse me, shall not exceed the lesser of 55% of eligible approved project cost as determined by the MSBA, or 2, the total maximum grant amount determined by the MSBA, and that the amount of borrowing authorized pursuant to this vote shall be reduced by any grant amount set forth in the project funding agreement that may be executed between the town of East Long Meadow and the MSBA. Any premium received upon the sale of any bonds or notes approved by this vote, less any such premium applied to the payment of the cost of issuance of such bonds or notes, may be applied to the payment of cost approved by this vote in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 20 of the general laws, thereby reducing the amount authorized to be borrowed to pay such cost by a like amount.
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Don, and thank you, Kathy. Is there any discussion? Ralph?
Mike, I've got a couple questions. So originally in 2019, we did an agreement. Does that mean at that particular time, we weren't invited into the MSBA program and that's why the roof wasn't done then? Because now we're 2 years later looking at the project.
I'm going to, I don't want to put you on the spot, Kathy, but can you add anything to that?
I can conjecture, but I can't say with certainty because I don't have firsthand information. My guess is that the numbers for the project originally estimated, which drove that $3 million figure, probably came in a lot lower to drive the new figure, but I could be all wet on that.
I was just curious why we didn't go forwards with it 2 years ago. I thought with the MSBA program, You go through a process, you've got to approve the money and then you go forwards. It just seems like 2 years later, we're voting again. I just wasn't sure if we didn't get approved and now we're applying again.
Counselor, we actually, excuse me, Counselor, we actually received, or through the chair, we received money from the MSBA. We didn't go out to bond to pay for our portion of it, which has caused one of the big deficits of last year. Sorry, Counselor.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm good with it. I'm glad that the number came down on it. It's always nice when it's 2 million less than what you're expecting.
What they told me in when we did some research on this is that the Counselor Hill is absolutely right. There's a formula that the MSBA uses, and they like buildings, et cetera. And so they come up with a number, and then we just got a better deal. They came in less than what that formula created. They don't go by estimates. You have to do the formula and then base it off that.
Great, thank you.
Just as a point of information through the chair, Ralph, my understanding is that project's finished.
That's
Yeah.
exactly what Steve was just saying. I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
It sounded like we were starting the whole process again. And that's good news. It's good news that we finished it and it's under, way under what we expected. We don't get that good news that often, so that's good.
Better coming in under than over, right?
Absolutely.
Any other discussion?
Mike, through the chair.
Tom?
Steve, I'm looking back through my notes at that time, and the projected number coming from the MSBA was $1,285,400. Was that the number we received?
No, we received $670,581 from the MSBA. The total grant they were authorizing, I believe, was about $707,000. And there's still a couple things under discussion, but the majority has come in. So we used the $670,581. That's what we actually received from the MSBA.
Okay, so this number that we're talking about today, this $913,534, is the new number?
Right, that's what we have to borrow to take care of the deficit and to ensure that we don't get hit again on our free cash with it.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
If there's no further discussion, we'll roll call vote. I'll start with yes. And Marilyn?
Yes.
Don? I'm sorry. Don?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Kathy?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
And Tom?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you all. Remaining under financial matters, tonight is the presentation of the town manager's proposed operating budget for FY22 per Article 6, Section 2 of the Home Rule Charter. I just want to say once again, this is a presentation, and for those of you chiming in maybe for the first time during the budget process, after all of us have had a chance to digest the budget, there will be a public hearing, and council members will be able to weigh in, and the public as well. So that being said, Mary?
Sure, thank you, President Kane. Tonight's draft budget comes to you in really 5 parts. The first is the budget message. Second is the organizational chart, then the so-called summary of uses, revenues and uses, and then all the department detail, and lastly, a comprehensive capital improvement plan, which isn't just the 22 projects. It includes our 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, some long-term projects, and many other items of information that Mike can discuss in greater detail when we get there. So I don't want to read, quoting Jeannie Quigletti, I don't want to read the budget message either, although it is posted online as of today on our website. But I do want to highlight for you what I at least think is important to take from this draft. We've been through a rough year, and we survived it through the great effort of so many of the people that work for East Long Meadow, and particularly the department heads. And I really want to thank them again, because this budget that you're getting from me tonight essentially comes to you almost down to the penny, exactly the way the department head submitted it to me. I asked them for level services. I asked them to be restrictive, to be cautious, to be careful. And they all were, each and every one, with a couple of very minor exceptions that are very important exceptions, and those being town manager's office, the finance office, and not necessarily in that order, police and fire departments. So, you know, we went through a lot to get this done. Particularly want to thank the capital program committee, that those individuals met half a dozen times, probably within a 10-day period or 2 weeks, and reviewed $23 million worth of potential submissions in a very, very short period of time. And I'm indebted to each and every one of them. If we could give gifts without violating the ethics law, I certainly would be happy to do that. But anyway, I think it's just important to express appreciation to people that work as hard as they do. And so forgive me for being a bit redundant in that. It's just, I believe, probably the most important part of my budget message. So we are basing the draft, of course, as you do every year, on the governor's proposed figures based on the cherry sheets, but these are figures that are old. The governor presented his proposed budget in January of this year. The legislature has not acted on it yet. There's been a slight increase in Chapter 70 aid. And if you recall Senator Lesser's comments a couple of weeks ago when he was with us at our meeting, he sort of hinted that he thought the legislature might increase the general state aid numbers, but obviously he can't guarantee that and has to be cautious in the commentary that he makes in advance. But we're hopeful, we're cautiously optimistic that we may get a bump in that state revenue. But for now, it's based on what the governor has submitted, and we have to live with that until the legislature's votes are taken. And if there's a change, then obviously the budget will change as well. With respect to the local receipts, you know, COVID obviously is still prevalent among us, so we have sort of tried to be very careful about local receipts. Meals tax, we reduced significantly last year, and we're keeping it low this year. Although we think there's pent-up demand, that people are anxious to get out to eat and attend events and so forth, but we can't bank on that for budget purposes. So the meals tax revenue you'll see is still lower than pre-COVID numbers, certainly, as well as the motor vehicle excise. Our new growth is down a bit from what we estimated last year. That may also change, but that's based on the assessment of our assessor, who's quite capable, but it's down to 350 from 500,000 last year. So that has an impact. And with 2.5, we were able to increase the general revenue a little over $1 million. And that's 1.1 million that's cited in my report. As I said, most of the departments have either reduced expenses where possible, or they've submitted level funded budgets. I will point out that there are presently 2 of our labor unions in town whose contracts have expired or will expire on June 30th. The police union contract will expire on June 30th of 21. The formerly known as Town Employees Union contract expired last June. And you might wonder why that's not settled yet. And the reason for that is that a year ago, January, that union voted to take on a new affiliation. They're no longer called the Town Employees Union. They're now 2 divisions of what's known as UPSI, United Public Service Employees Union. There's a professional division and a non-professional division. So the vote that was taken caused the negotiations that were underway to cease, and they've now retained new counsel. They have new representation. So those negotiations have begun again, but when we finish, there will be obviously some potential for a retroactive payment through June of 2020. And there's nothing included in the budget as a, so that I can, with a straight face, say that we're bargaining in good faith. I don't want to put in a percentage and either not live up to it or anticipate the conclusion before we negotiate. So there's zero in the budget for those increases. The other contractual increases are step increases or things that are, already guaranteed by prior contracts. So that could be a bump if and when those contracts are settled, which I hope will be soon. The draft includes some plans as I described them. They're my major goals that I want to see to improve the town's efficiency. And I know I've harped for months and months and months on the finance department. Steve, God bless him, is doing yeoman work with essentially no staff. He's other than Olga, God bless her. I don't know where the town of East Long Meadow would be without that woman's efforts. But having said that, our management letter, we've had audit findings. Our payroll is constantly, well, let me put it this way. Every second Tuesday, like today, for example, the finance department basically can accomplish nothing other than payroll for that biweekly period. We need to improve there. Steve just referenced the deficiency on the free cash because of the work at Meadowbrook that wasn't bonded timely. Well, that's an audit finding, and that results in a free cash deficit. Those things should never happen. So we desperately need, at least in my humble opinion, we desperately need an internal auditor, at least for the short term, to try to institute some policies and procedures to prevent contracts from being negotiated by departments without approval of finance or of my office. We recently had a situation with a truck being delivered to the town parking lot that we hadn't signed a contract for. And I'm not criticizing any individual or any individual department, but these are things that an internal auditor would make sure it didn't happen. So I can't emphasize enough the need for that position. And I'll get a chance to emphasize it more, I'm sure, when the Finance Oversight Committee begins, and Steve can certainly chime in and echo everything I've said. But I want you to know where this is coming from. I've been paying attention to the focus groups that our master plan consultant has conducted. They've conducted these focus groups that in early March, and I referenced them in the budget message, where they interviewed many of the department heads and board members who were able to offer their insightfulness on town history, the pent-up, as I said, the pent-up enthusiasm for recreation projects. I heard the extension of the rail trail 1,000,000 times if I heard it once. All ideas that are that have a lot of public support and that need funding, and they can't get done because we don't have the money in the operational budget and even in the capital budget most times to accomplish these things. So that led me to the thought that a grant writer, a grant administrator, a special projects coordinator, quasi-deputy town manager on a pilot basis for 1 year would, on a part-time pilot basis, this budget amount that I'm contemplating is only for 20 hours. But I think at the end of that period of time, it would give us an evidence-based, some evidence-based basis on which to determine if a deputy town manager going forward is feasible or not. I have my ideas about coordinating payroll into the HR department, which I'll discuss later in detail and why that is very important. And so maybe just a reorganization at some time in the future would suffice rather than a deputy manager. But so these are just my thoughts, and that's why they're in the draft, so that we can vet them, talk about them, and hopefully the council will see fit to award both Steve's position and mine, because they're funded by savings that we've achieved by new hires in the HR management position, planning. So there's essentially no significant cost increase to the budget because the savings from those two, well, Council on Aging, Police Department, Planning, and Human Resources, new managers are all earning less than their predecessors. And those savings will more than compensate the salaries that Steve's looking for his position and I'm looking for in my office. Little different story in the police and fire departments. Those are the only other two positions in town that are being requested in this budget. I know you've heard the story for many years in the past about the desire to hire a mid-level manager in the police department. I know that in prior fiscal years, the matter's been before you about a police captain and it's never been approved. I think this year, I hope this year is different. We have a new police chief who has a great deal of enthusiasm and understanding. And that, by the way, this is by no means disparagement of his predecessor. Think the world of Chief DeLessio. But with the enactment of the police reform bill and the scope of a modern police department and the process that we went through to find this chief in the limited pool, query whether that limited pool was because we don't have another layer of management. The chief currently in East Long Meadow is the chief 365 days a year, all day, all night. There's an awful lot of projects that cannot be done under those circumstances. I can attest to that in my office. And we're not accredited and we're not certified. And those are those accreditations that will happen sooner or later will allow the town perhaps to lower its insurance premiums. It will better train our police officers. And perhaps more important than anything else, it will allow the current staff in whom we invest a lot when they begin as patrolmen to have a path to career development, which up till now has been somewhat stunted. So, and certainly Chief Williams can elaborate more in terms of his needs and desires when the Finance Oversight Committee wants to interview him, if that's their pleasure. The only other, and by the way, he initially wanted that job full-time for the full fiscal year of 22, and I said, I don't think that's realistic for very practical reasons. The union needs to negotiate. He wants to do an assessment center, which I recommend, to determine which of the internal applicants, assuming there are internal applicants, is the best choice. Those things will not be accomplished by July 1. And then there's also the question about union staffing and whether we'll perhaps get this position and lose a sergeant, or whether there'll have to be some negotiations about retaining 6 sergeants. All of those things are subject of future discussion. But Chief Williams asked for the position for the entire fiscal year, and I told him 6 months max is what I would support for this year. So it's essentially a part-time position. And the same is true with the fire department. Paul Morissette is asking yet again, and I understand he's had this on his request list before, for a deputy chief. I don't think that need is as urgent in that department. However, he has 3 captains. And as you all know, the exponential growth of the fire department and the ambulance service and the paramedic staff has really served the town very well. And as I say in my report, it both supports and begs the question of whether that extra management position is necessary. Chief Morissette thinks it is. And I respect his opinion on these things. He's the consummate professional and he manages his department extremely well. And he has the resources through the ambulance fund to divert many of the expenses out of that were in previous times paid from the fire department budget over to the ambulance budget. So even with this request, there's still I think there's an overall decrease in the fire department budget for 22. It's actually more detailed than I wanted to get into on those positions, but I figured if you had an opportunity to read the budget message, you know that those are the key points in it. Aside from those, again, I just go back to the fact that this budget is less than a 1% increase. And if that's not testament to the diligence and cooperation of department heads, I don't know what is. Our health insurance is the killer again, the budget buster, so to speak. Our retirement assessment has increased a tad, and you all know, or at least are somewhat aware of what's going on with the Hampden County Retirement Board. Our investment is not at risk, I can assure you of that. But we've been able to absorb those costs. I mean, $500,000 again this year in the health insurance premiums. So, I mean, for a family plan now, we're paying $15,000 a year per employee. That's just the town share. So that's a lot of money. And that's the most popular plan. But despite these things, we're able to get through because of decisions that Steve made, for example, by refinancing our outstanding bonds. We saved almost $200,000 a year in our debt service by his decision to refinance those bonds and take advantage of low interest rates. So we're trying to find ways to meet the need and keep the services going. And that kind of brings me full circle to the whole grant position. I know I referenced in my report, boy, every single department head, almost without exception, spends a lot of time searching for grants, applying for grants, administering grants. And we don't have anybody to keep track of those once we receive them. And I think about all the effort that our department heads could make in their substantive areas where they're better suited to spend their energy. They're very good at finding the grants and writing the applications, but I think we could have a professional person who could do that out of my office, for example, and allow these department heads to go back to spending their energy and their vocational skills as they're better suited to do so. So, and I think a grant writer would prove his or her worth in spades many times over. I hope I'm right. If I were betting, I would say I'd bet $100 that position would generate savings beyond belief. So that's essentially the content of the budget message. I do say at the end that we're also moving forward on some capital projects. We have $1,255,000, I think, is the number that the committee agreed on. And we've sought out various other funding sources, not just the enterprise fund bonds, or we've talked to the CPC about using some of their funding for bonding. We're talking about using some of the old capital projects that we can close out that have balances remaining to fund some of these things. So no stone unturned, as the saying goes, is how we're trying to pay for the town's needs. So that's part one. I'm not going to talk about the organizational chart because it's fluid and it may be different tomorrow than it is today, depending on if anybody left our employment overnight. I'm not sure. I didn't hear about anything today, but it changes a lot, and that's why we update it quarterly, but not any more often than that. The next part is the sources and uses, which I've touched on. Governor's budget, new growth, local revenue decreased. The other categories are what they are every year, and the department line items result in 0.009 of an increase. There's also a page on capital projects. We can discuss those if you'd like in some particulars. And then the comprehensive plan, which, as I say, this year, we put a table of contents in there, and the last page of it is our long-term projects, because in the course of our discussions, one of our committee members who's very involved in town affairs indicated that he was somewhat unaware of the Heritage Park plans. And I guess that told me a couple of things. One, we have to get the word out more. And two, we need to place these projects, these long-term projects, in a document so that anyone who's interested can read about them. Now, so this year in our long-term plan, we have the whole sidewalk plan. We have the Porter Road culvert. We have rail trail expansion. There's a half a dozen other things. I don't have it in front of me. They're just there so that anyone who wants to think about or contribute to long-term planning, these are things that are, you know, going to take 10, 12, 15, 30 years perhaps to fund. But they're also to create an awareness that 2% of our annual budget is not going to be sufficient to meet the town's needs going forward. We're going to eventually need a new public safety complex. Police department is really not a happy spot to work in. So there's a lot of need, and obviously we have to try to balance that with the taxpayers' appetite and ability to pay. And of course, there's the hopefully in the near future the high school study. So there's a lot going on. We're trying to keep tabs on all the projects and work with everybody who has a voice here and get their viewpoint, their opinion, and move the town forward as best we can. So that's all in the draft, and hopefully not a lot of it will change in a month, but some of the numbers may, and I would hope that they would change for the better.
Thanks, Mary. I just want to add that I had the privilege of being able to work with you a little bit on the budget, and the message sent to the department heads was level funding, and they all pretty much adhered to that fiscal responsibility that was requested. So that obviously correlated to very insignificant changes in the draft budget. I just wanted to mention too that the draft budget is due per the charter by April 1st, so we complied with that. And I wanted to thank the department heads. I believe there's 5 of them that are new that put their budgets together for the first time for the town. So it's obviously much more time consuming doing that for the first time, but we met the deadline and we have a presentation, and Mary, thanks for all the info. Okay. Under old business, Jeannie's going to give us a little update on our last 2 council meetings. I believe it was the last council meeting when we were discussing where we go from all the information that's submitted. So Jeannie, I'll let you speak on that topic, if you will.
Thank you. Reading again. After the town council's approval of the charter revisions as recommended by the Charter Review Committee, as well as other changes made by the council, I talked with Assistant Attorney General Kelly Gunnigan. Kelly is the one that will review our charter revisions and has been in previous conversations with both me and Town Attorney Jesse Belcher-Tim regarding this. There are forms that I need to complete and submit to her along with an annotated copy of the charter showing all the approved revisions as approved last week by the council, by you. Jesse does not need to look at this again before it goes to the AG's office. Kelly said if she has any questions, she'll reach out to him directly. And given that she's reviewed most of the charter's revisions and has had conversations with Jesse, I doubt there will be many, if any, considerable issues during her review, but that will come. The charter amendments will go on the ballot in June, and assuming they are voted upon, we can have the final document go to print. An annotated version of the charter with those amendments should be available to the voter on our website so they can preview it before voting. And there's no statute that requires amendments to be outlined in the final document, but I would suggest that those amendments are reflected either as a supplement or in the end or footnotes or otherwise when the final copy goes to print. Just in conclusion, I expect that with the town manager's permission, I can touch base with Jesse during this process just to make sure we're following the correct procedures as we move along. So that's where we are now, and I'm almost done with incorporating the council's changes as of last week into one document, and I'm assuming I can get that done tomorrow and probably submit it to Kelly tomorrow with my forms. And she's great. She gave me her cell number. she's familiar with the charter changes, so I expect it to move along. They have 28 days from the time they get it, but given the fact that she's seen it already, I didn't expect it will take that long.
Sounds great. Thanks, Jeannie.
You're welcome.
We don't have any new business to mention this evening, so I'll entertain a motion to leave open and enter executive.
I move that we go into executive session to discuss litigation strategy in the matter of Sarah Menard versus the town of East Long Meadow, only to return to open session for the purpose of adjournment.
I'll second that.
Okay, the motion's been made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Hearing and seeing none. Thanks. We'll leave open and enter executive.
Roll call.
And roll call vote, starting with Don.
Yes.
Thank you. Marilyn?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Kathy?
Yes.
Ralph?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
And Tom?
Yes.
Thank you.